Good evening and welcome to the Hawarden City offices for the Hawarden City Council meeting on Wednesday, January 27th, 2016. Present tonight, everyone except for Councilman Tim, and we're at 5:38 p.m. to begin. Our first standard agenda item is the approval of the January 13th, 2016 council meeting minutes.
So moved.
A motion by Payne.
Second.
Seconded by Travis. Any further questions or clarifications? All in favor then please of the January 13th council meeting minutes say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes 4-0. Next again is approval of claims for payment, and we'll start to my left with John for questions.
No question.
Okay. Payne, any questions on payments?
None, thank you.
Travis?
None, thank you.
Monty, questions?
So moved.
There's been a motion by Monty. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Travis, or excuse me, by Payne. Okay. All in favor of claims for payment say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes 4-0. Next is open business from the community. Looks like everyone is here that'll be on the agenda, so we'll move on to the mayor's report. Gary and I visited earlier this week about putting together a planning session for the council and the community. With a number of the projects being started and some now being completed, we need to look at and prioritize our projects for the near future. Also, with upcoming staff changes in the next few years, these needs will need to be addressed also. So after we get through the budget process, we'll visit about the process of this project, and we hope to get some citizens' input on our community needs with that. My thanks to the city staff and the city council members for the upcoming budget numbers. The last few years, our staff and council have made many great decisions in regard to our finances and projects, which leads to a very lean budget. We have cut our transfers each year, and our budget looks very good. My thanks to Colin Wiggins and Val Haverhals for presenting at our last city council meeting our last city council meeting. The information from the development committee and the Hawarden Library was very useful. The library programs look very exciting and very easy to use. And lastly, we look forward to the grand opening of Browder's Plaza on Central Avenue, which will take place on February the 15th. And we welcome now Big Sue Embroidery to their new location. I think they're very pleased to be there. Are there any comments from council members at this point? Hearing none, we'll move to staff reports. Mike, anything from your point of view?
Nothing.
Okay. Jim, anything?
No, nothing.
Okay, thanks. Tom?
Just one thing, the outage we had this morning, we had a squirrel that died on 18th and Avenue L this morning. Took a fuse out. That's all I have.
Good day for the squirrel. Gary?
I just had two minor things as well. First of all, I'd like to welcome John and look forward to working with him as well as the rest of you. And also, I mentioned at the last meeting about the water and wastewater reports. I did include them in your packet after the memo for this meeting. And if you look at page 5 of the water inspection and page 2 and 3 of the wastewater inspection, you'll see that there are no deficiencies, but there are some recommendations for the future, and we'll spend some time considering those as we do our planning sessions and our planning for the future. So.
Thank you. Move on to agenda item number 3, which is a review of the fiscal year 2015 audit. Graham Forbes from Williams & Company. Thanks for being with us.
Looks like you've got a lot on the agenda tonight, so I'll try and keep things fairly brief for you. But feel free to stop me with questions anytime or catch me at the end. Either way, whichever you'd like, I'd be more than happy to field any questions you might have. But just like to thank Gary and Cheryl and the rest of the finance and accounting staff for the help they give us for pulling together all the information we need to do the audit, put together financial statements, all the disclosures, and a lot of information goes into the 80 some odd pages here, and it takes a lot of efforts from city staff as well as our staff to get that put together. And so I want to thank them for their cooperation on that. I think that for the things went well. The city's been working on, some of the financial, like you spoke before with the budget process, reducing expenditures, reducing transfers, and, trying to cut some of the fat out there. And I think you can see that in these financial statements as well. So nice to kind of see the fruits of some of that labor start to show up here a little bit. But I think the first thing I'll draw your attention to here is on the second page of the audit report. It's our independent auditor's report. And basically these couple pages here are kind of the meat and potatoes of the whole 80 pages. It's where we put our opinion on the financial statements as a result of our audit procedures we did. So you'll see on the bottom of page 2 in that paragraph labeled opinions, it states there that in our opinion and the opinion of other auditors, and that's because a component unit of the city is the hospital, which is required to be reported in the city financial statement because of the taxing authority relationship and the overall governance relationship the hospital has with the city. So that you'll find that information of the hospital in this audit report, but that hospital, as you know, is audited by another group of auditors in a completely separate audit. So rather than recreate the wheel and create a lot of additional time and expense for the hospital, we just take the audit report furnished to us by that other group of auditors and include those audited financial statements in the city audit report. And so that's why you'll see in that paragraph on the bottom of page 2, it notes that in our opinion, as well as a report of other auditors, the financial statements contained in this set of financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. So that's a good, clean, unmodified opinion of what you're after. So no disclaimers, adverse opinions, anything of that nature, just a good unmodified opinion. So nothing to report there. Starting on page 4 is what's called the management's discussion and analysis. What that is that's some comparative information along with some analysis put together by Gary and or his staff on kind of analyzing those comparisons and giving some commentary on why some of the fluctuations occurred that did. So I always kind of refer to that as kind of the cliff notes of the financial statements if you're looking for some summarized, just kind of get a pulse of where we're at information. Those 7 or 8 pages is a good place to start to get a feel for what the following 70 or so pages tell you. So if you're looking to kind of get an overview of some good commentary from city staff, that's a good place to start in that management's discussion and analysis section. So from there, I will, I think, skip back to pages 20 and 21 of the audit report. And there's what's called the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And the main thing I'll draw your attention to is on page 20 there, the general fund column. That's where we account for most of the non-utility service operations of the city. That's where your street department, your police department, your admin staff, and a lot of the other just general citizen services and general operation of the city that's not utility related flows through that fund, and it's kind of the overall operating fund of the city, and it's one we kind of look to measure a lot the financial health of any government is that general fund. That's a lot of your unassigned, unrestricted dollars all run through there. So you'll see towards the bottom of the page that there was a net change in fund balance of a little over $100,000. So that's obviously an increase going the direction you want to go. And one of the measures we see used a lot in governments as relates to that ending fund balance number is the number of days expenditures that you have in your unassigned fund balance. And so you'll see the total expenditures of the general fund for FY15 was about $1.45 million, which is actually a decrease from about $1.6 million the year before, which I think there's a number of reasons that kind of fall into that, budgeting, some different cuts, timing of projects, and a few other things. But a sizable decrease in the expenditures. And you'll see on page 17, there was an unassigned fund balance of just under $600,000 in the general fund at year end. And so that translates into about 147 days of expenditures, or about 40% of the expenditures in that unassigned fund balance. And that's probably what we'd like to see in that range is anywhere between 30 to 50%. What we want there is some cushion to allow, as you all know, the property tax calendar, the big paydays, if you will, come in the spring and then again in the fall. So to have a little cushion there to get through, to be able to operate in between those payment times is essential to be able to operate the city efficiently. So we'd like to see in that 30 to 50% range, and you're at 40%, so you're right kind of in the heart of where we would suggest you'd want to be as far as that unassigned fund balance in the general fund. So I think that's definitely a positive point. The rest of the governmental funds there, if you flip back to page 20 and 21, you can see all had increases, pretty modest amounts. That capital project fund wasn't increased, and that's more of a timing function on when bond proceeds are received and then when they're expended. So we'll probably see that go the other direction next year, just as things kind of the timing and nature of that type of fund. So all positives there. Next item I'll quickly flip to is pages 25 and 26. And that is the statement of revenues and expenses for the business type activities. That's your utility funds, as you see, the water, wastewater, electric, and so forth. And this statement shows the operating results for those funds for the year. And you'll see there was a few decreases, few increases, but overall, you'll see on the bottom right page, total a slight increase for the year. So I think that's really what you kind of want to see there. I mean, not losing money, but not socking away large amounts of money, because one thing factored into this is depreciation on the infrastructure and service system for those various utilities. So that's factored in here. So, I think nothing alarming or unusual there. I mean, just some good, pretty consistent results on those utility funds as well. So. Otherwise, following that, a few pages later, you'll see starting on page 33 is the notes to the financials. That's where I won't go into any depth there, but if you're looking for some detailed information on the city's capital assets, the city's different debt issuances and where they stand and maturity schedules for those, the city accounting policies, and just a lot of other detailed information I'm not going to bore you with, but if you're looking to drill into any one area, that's a good place to start, is in that notes section. So some good information there as well. Quickly from there, I'm going to direct you to pages 63 and 64. That's what's called the budget comparison schedule. And what we do there is we take the final, as amended, if applicable, budgeted amounts and compare those to the actual results for the year and see basically how did we come out compared to what we budgeted for the year. And the main focus there is on the expenditure side of the house. I mean, that's the one you can control ultimately, and the one where the state of Iowa monitors as well. And you'll see there's a few minor variances in a couple of the functional line items, but overall came in at about $3.3 million under budget. A big piece of that being in that business type activity line, which includes, again, the city utilities, as well as, in this comparison schedule, the hospital operating budget as well. So, a little bit deceiving there as far as kind of what we've all got included in there, but overall very positive. I say a few small variances in a couple of the individual line items, but overall well under budget in total, and good positive result there as well. Otherwise, following that is some combining schedules for some of the smaller funds of the city that are operated individually because of the funding stream that goes into them, having outside restrictions that make them be required to be monitored separately, and a few other different smaller combining schedules, as well as some reporting that we're required to do by the state follows that, as well as a few additional reports that the government auditing standards requires us to issue. And I'd be happy to answer questions on any of those, but I'm not going to drill into any of that. I think the only other thing I want to discuss here quickly before I open it up to any questions is if you look on page 66, for the first year this year being fiscal year ending June 30 of 15, the city was required to record a liability for the unfunded portion of their proportionate share of the IPER's unfunded liability. As you all know, the state code mandates each year how much, based on what type of occupation they are at the city, whether it be the public safety occupations or just the regular employees. The state code mandates how much when those individuals receive pay, how much is withheld from the pay of those individuals, and then how much the city is required to match to fund IPERS for those particular employees. And the city, and they're actually following that on page 67, is a schedule for the last 10 years indicating how many dollars have been required to be contributed by the city to IPERS and then how many have been contributed. And you'll see for the last 10 years and farther back, I'm sure, that the city has exactly contributed what they've been required to for each of those 10 years. However, and I think rightfully so, IPERS as a whole is about 83%, I believe, is the latest figures I heard, funded, which means if every IPERS covered employee in the entire state retired tomorrow, there'd be about 17% that they don't have in the coffers ready to pay those people out. And that actually puts Iowa in the top, I think, 5 to 6 states in the country as far as the funding level of their IPERS. One of the ones, South Dakota, actually has a surplus right now in their public employee retirement system, which, to me is almost a little overboard. You've almost made those cities contribute too much, thus the taxpayers probably had to pay too much tax to get there. So I think, while some people are alarmed when they see some of the liability numbers that are getting booked, IPERS is well funded, although when you start to dollar it out, that unfunded liability turns into a big number. But I think, probably with some fiscal responsibility, it's probably the right way to be as opposed to being overfunded. So, and those numbers move based on market conditions as far as the returns on the investments within IPERS and different things like that. So there's a little bit of fluctuation there. But so you'll see there on page 66 that as of June 30 of 14, which are the numbers we had to use to record this liability, the city of Hawarden was 1/100th and some change of the overall IPERS liability. And that dollared into, if you look on page, bear with me here, sorry. On page 60, about a $710,000 liability for the 17 or so % of the unfunded portion of that overall liability. So, long story short, the city of Hawarden is about 1/100th of 1% of the overall IPERS entity, and that percentage translated into about a $700,000 liability we had to record on the city books this year for the first time to recognize that there's a portion of the overall pension promises, if you will, that IPERS has made to all their employees that IPERS doesn't have cash sitting in the bank waiting to pay. And like I said, that's standard operating procedure, nothing to be alarmed about. And one other thing I'd like to point out is the city is going to contribute to make their required contribution that state code mandates each year and nothing more. I mean, this isn't a liability the city needs to go out and try and satisfy and pay off right away. It's more of a measurement to, I think, kind of open people's eyes that, hey, there is, some unmet needs sitting out there that needs to be recognized. And I think, for well-run plans like IPERS and other in South Dakota Employee Retirement Plan, it's kind of a non-event. I think the reason this accounting standard came to be was for your Detroit's, your state of Illinois, state of California that made some promises that I don't think that snuck up on it, for lack of a better word, and be turned into a promise that they couldn't keep. And so I think the Accounting Standards Board was trying to put this in front of people so people could see what some of these promises dollared into. So people and bonding companies as well as the citizens kind of recognize what kind of liabilities were hanging over some of these people's heads, or entities' heads, I guess, in this case. So, did it affect the equity, if you will, or the fund balance of a few of the governmental funds? Absolutely it did, but again, nothing that I would be alarmed about, or nothing that on budgeting or any other ongoing operating issues will it affect. The city will still be required to make that mandated match to the IPERS covered employees going forward, just like they have for the last many, many years. So wanted to draw your attention to that, probably more information than you really wanted, but I know I've gotten a lot of questions on that, especially from the governments who, aren't happy about, throwing a rather large liability onto the balance sheet, but, it's fairly explainable and probably, for full disclosure purposes is a good idea to show there, especially for some of the governments in other areas of the country that have a real liability that needs to be addressed on how they are going to fund it. So overall, I think it was a good move. So, but I think I'll quit my rambling there, but would be happy to answer any questions you might have, or Gary, if there's any other areas you wanted any discussion on or to be pointed out or that you had questions on.
I don't think so, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. The questions?
Questions for Graham? Good. Again, thank you for your presentation and for the audit.
Appreciate it. And if any of your questions come to mind, feel free to funnel those through Gary, and we'll be happy to answer those and get back to Gary, and he can respond to you. So thank you very much.
Very good. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Move on to agenda item number 4, hospital update, please, by Jason Trimble.
Good evening. If you've driven around the property lately, you've seen some progress happening. A lot of the steel's going up, and they're backfilling the 1936 building. And also they're starting to put roofing on. And so they've gotten the bypass where the ambulance will drive through, and then they're starting on the main building. And they're also starting to frame it in. So the plan is to frame it up and get heat in there so the plumbers can get in and get moving. And so we set a milestone goal that we're going to start pouring inside concrete March 1st. So things are rapidly moving along, and it's really amazing. I'll go in to work and come out and I'm going, whoa. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening in a day. So, of course, it's mucky, but they're working through it and not having any problems. So,
Got to be tough working conditions with the moisture stuff.
yeah, it's better that it gets a little warmer. So, I mean,
Yeah.
those guys that are setting steel, I think it would be a lot better 20 above than 20 below. So,
Right.
Yeah,
Everything's been safe for them at this point,
yep,
obviously.
we've had over 200 days of safe days. So everything's been good. No problems. Things are progressing nicely, and we'll continue to press forward.
Any questions for Jason while he's here with us? Good. Appreciate again the update.
Thank you for the
Thank
time.
you very much. Agenda item number 5 would be a resolution 2016-02, the designation of the authorized representative to the Missouri Basin Municipal Electric Cooperative Association. And we'd like to make Tom Kane our first designee and Gary Tucker the second designee with this resolution.
So moved.
There's a motion by Travis. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Payne. Questions or clarifications for this resolution? Hearing none, I'll call then for a roll call vote, please, for resolution 2016-02.
Allen?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Feldhecker?
Aye.
Harvey?
On a 4-0 roll call vote, resolution 2016-02 passes. Agenda item number 6, the approval of the final contract with closeout documents for the Phase 1 distribution improvements 2013 and 14. We've had this on our last agenda item, and our understanding is that they have not completed their progress in meeting what they need to do at this point with one of the...
Yeah, we still have one other thing they need to complete, so we'd like to table it again till the next meeting if we could.
Make a motion to table.
been a motion by Travis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by
John.
John. Thank you. You guys sound alike. All in favor of tabling that final contract, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That'll be tabled. It'll be on our next agenda item again. DGR proposal for 10th Light Street lighting project. That's with us tonight, and thanks for being with us today.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us to go over the 10th Street Highway Lighting Project. You have a memo there that we wrote up, and it describes the different options that we looked at for the city of Hawarden. Essentially, we had 4 options along Highway 10 that we wanted to look at. The first option was to replace all the existing fixtures with a decorative type fixture similar to the ones that you have outside of the city hall here. And then option 2 was to replace the existing fixtures with a Cobra head style light fixture, which is simply an aluminum pole with like a 6-foot arm mast, and then the light is attached to the end of the arm mast and it overhangs the roadway. You have some of those fixtures right now out on the east side, close to the state bridge out there, so it'll be something similar to that. And the third option was to replace the existing fixtures with a combination of the decorative street lights and the Cobra heads. And then the fourth option we had was to maintain existing lighting levels, and we'll get into that option in a little bit more details here as we go on. But to go into a little bit more detail on the first 3 options, we looked at using all decorative fixtures, using the new LED lights. The typical spacing would be between 135 and 170 feet, and it's going to cost roughly about $225,000 for the fixtures themselves. That does not include installation costs. We have installation costs broken out later on in the memo, and I'll explain why we did not include that in these option costs here, so that'll be an adder to the overall cost. One advantage of option number 1 is that it'll be a more pleasing and aesthetic look compared to having Cobra heads. A lot of communities are moving more toward a decorative type fixture if they want to highlight some portion of town, like your downtown area. A lot of people will put in the decorative fixture compared to a regular Cobra head style. A disadvantage to this arrangement is that they do not emit as much light as the Cobra heads, so therefore you have to have more fixtures and increased cost. Option 2, with all Cobra head fixtures, again using a LED fixture, that was going to be around $70,000 for the fixtures and the poles. And advantage of this option, obviously you're going to need less fixtures because we can get more light out of a Cobra head fixture than the decorative fixture. But the disadvantage, they're not as aesthetically pleasing as the decorative fixtures. So that's a decision that the council and the city will have to make on which way they'd like to go. Option 3 included a combination of the decorative fixtures and the Cobra head style. And for this option, what we did is we broke Highway 10 into 2 different zones. The first zone, which is towards the west end, it goes from, I believe it's E Avenue to I Avenue near the library, and we were going to put decorative fixtures in that area there. And then from I Avenue out to the State Bridge is where we would put the Cobra heads. That way it would sort of highlight you coming into the downtown area and give it a more prominent look for you. This option was estimated to cost $130,000 for the poles and fixtures. Like I said, the advantage of this is as you're coming into town from the east, you get the Cobra head look, and then when you're getting closer to the downtown, the central business district, you'll get the more aesthetically pleasing decorative light fixtures. And one of the disadvantages is you have a mixture of 2 different types of street lights that you'll need to maintain over the life of the fixtures, so you might have to maintain more spare parts. All those three options were based upon, we laid it out based upon the current lighting standards and with the discussions with Iowa Department of Transportation, being that it is the State Highway 10, they have jurisdiction over what we do there. They don't care if you go with the Cobra head or if you go with the decorative fixture, as long as we maintain the industry standard lighting levels, and that's what we have done with those three options. Option 4, what we looked at is trying to maintain your existing light levels. We came down one evening and we had somebody measure up what your existing light levels, and it is bright. It is probably about over 2 times the standard and what you need. So we looked at option 4, what would it take to maintain those existing light levels? And, you know, it's estimated to cost $200,000 for the poles and fixtures for that option alone. Trying to maintain those existing light levels, you know, the city's main responsibility is to light the highway. That is your main responsibility. It's not your responsibility to maintain the areas beyond the public right-of-way. You know, some communities, you know, like to maintain the lighting levels lower so it's darker in some residential areas, and if certain residential people want a security light, they'll put security lights on their houses. But for the city, the responsibility is to maintain the industry light levels along the public highway. And that's what we've done with these 4 different options here. And like I said, all the fixtures are going to be, would be the new LED lights. Right now you have what is called the high pressure sodium light, which gives off the yellow glow. With the LED fixtures, they're going to be a white light, and it's going to be much brighter light. There's some, the city of Sioux Falls, we're working with the city of Sioux Falls and putting some LED fixtures in and retrofitting some of their street lights. But that is the industry trend right now, is most municipalities are moving towards the LED fixture because, as you're probably aware, LED fixtures use less power. So it'll save monthly bills for your energy costs. On page 4 of the memo there, we list all 4 different options for the cost estimates. And then we have a separate line item for the installation cost. Installation costs vary between $140,000 and $210,000. And the reason why we have that range in there is because each different option has different number of light fixtures that are required. Obviously, with more light fixtures to install, the price for installation goes up. So, you know, if you chose the most expensive option, which would be number 1, all decorative fixtures at $225,000 plus the maximum installation cost, you know, you're looking at $435,000. And if you were to choose the least expensive option of all Cobra heads of option 2, you could get down to $210,000. So there is quite a range there. You know, and then on the bottom of page 4, we go into our recommendation. We feel that, you know, option 1 is a lot of money for all decorative when you don't need it. Option 2, you could use the all Cobra heads, which will give you your basic fixture and light levels. And option 3 is the combination of your Cobra head and decorative. And option 4 is trying to maintain the existing light levels there. And I guess it would be our recommendation to choose between options 2 and option 3. My opinion, option 3 would be a middle of the road option, and it'll, as you're coming into town, like I said earlier, you have the Cobra heads, and when you're getting closer to the downtown area, you'll be more aesthetically pleasing with the decorative light fixtures. And I believe Tom has given you guys a copy of of an image of a snapshot from Google Earth of Highway 10 with the decorative fixture imposed over the photo.
Yeah, it certainly has.
Right there is looking, I'm not sure which direction that one's looking for sure, but it gives you an overall view of what the decorative fixtures would look like compared to the existing fixtures. You can sort of see the existing fixtures behind the superimposed fixtures there.
And your option 3 has them just going to Avenue I though, right?
Pardon me?
Your option 3 had them from Avenue E to Avenue I?
That is correct. And then from the library out to the State Bridge would be using the Cobra Head style fixtures.
You have this running from M.
It actually goes to Quick Corner, the decorative ones from
Yep.
Avenue E to Quick Corner.
And then you have this from M on down. What's the difference in how far our decorative lights go out now? What's the price difference? Do you not know that offhand, or?
No, I don't know that offhand, no.
What is the stability of the RP8 standard? If we were to go meet the minimum, what's the likelihood that that would change in the near future where we would fall below the minimum?
I guess I can't speak for if the RP8 is going to change for lighting highway standards. To my knowledge, it's been at that current level on they have different classifications of roads. And this being a state highway, you know, we're trying to maintain what is classified as a state highway in an urban area. And those lighting levels, you know, have stayed consistently throughout the RP8 for the last few years. What they're going to do in the future, if you could tell me what the stock market is going to do tomorrow, you know, it'd be nice to know. But I think they're going to probably maintain the status quo in the near future.
Okay.
I haven't heard of any talk of any change of the standard.
Okay.
So, but this is the same standard that we're using for development of residential areas down in Sioux City where we're doing the street lighting.
Okay.
And we're using the same standard down there.
I think with any of those, as you mentioned, the citizens are going to have to understand that these lights are going to be lighting the street and not giving a lot of backlight into the front of their homes or those types of things. So there's going to be
That is
obviously
correct.
a difference there. But as you go through, I think town of Beersford, when they just did their streets, I think those are all LED, and boy, it's a nice bright light, and it really lights up the
Right.
area nicely with minimal poles. So.
Yep. And with these decorative lights, you know, you also don't have the night light escaping through the top of the fixture. They have a shroud on the top, so it reflects the light down towards the street, and it doesn't go up into the sky. And so you don't lose any light level that way.
I think the idea of the decorative will be nice if we then start to enhance at some point downtown also and tie that together, and we've kind of tied that out on this part of Central Avenue already. That might be a nice combination.
And I did want to point out one thing on the options where we had the decorative lights coming into the downtown. At the intersection of Highway 10 and Central Avenue, we did place a fixture in all four corners because that is your main intersection of the town, and it'll be the main focal point.
With our electric project, we've kind of put this money away for the Highway 10 project.
Well, we included 250 for the street lighting, 250,000 for street lighting, so in the amount that we borrowed, so. I think it looks like right now we'll be at around 270 available based on where we're at with our project and what we have left,
Okay.
so. And keep in mind, we did get 740,000 in the fall from MB Mecca for, that we might have a little extra available if you needed to, so.
Dennis, what's the timing if the council wanted to think about this for a meeting? What's the timing as far as ordering these types of things and getting the project complete?
Lead time on the fixtures right now are roughly about 4 to 8 weeks. So if the city wanted to get the project done this year by the end of 2016, a decision would have to be made, in the next few months, move forward and select which option we wanted to go to, and then work with the city staff on how we want to go out and purchase the fixtures and on the installation of the infrastructure that is needed. I did want to point out also on the installation cost, that is using all new conduit and all new wiring. We won't be reusing anything of the existing system, so everything will be brand new.
That'd be good, that existing system. Tom was showing me a flyer today of when the city purchased those, and there's no date on the flyer, actually, so it's been there for a while.
And who actually gets to do the install then? Our own city workers, or do we have to have somebody else? put
We'll have
those
somebody
in?
do that. Our guys are going to be as busy as they can possibly be this summer with the electric underground. They've still got 300 or 400 houses they're going to have to, we haven't hired the conversion from meter into the house, so our electric guys are doing all that conversion, so they'll have their hands full for.
Okay.
And the other thing I wanted to point out is, all these lights, being that they're along Highway 10, the state is requiring what they call breakaway bases. So if a car were to hit one of the poles, the anchor bolts that anchor the light down into the foundation that is screwed into the ground are breakaway, so they'll snap off. So that is one requirement. So that does add to the cost a little bit, roughly $400. And that's included in those costs.
Those old ones, we have breakaways now, don't we?
Right.
So to speak. It's fall-aways, so to speak.
Self-destruct, huh?
Yeah.
And Payne, our guys would probably do the final connectivity, like someone like Dave's Construction who's doing our underground project now would bore all the wire and conduit would be bored, so directional board. So our guys would probably do the final install.
Basically, my question was the installation cost. If our guys were to do it, is just basically a number on paper because our guys are doing it. But if it's an installation cost we're hiring out, that's money going out of our checkbook into theirs.
Right.
So that's basically all the question was for.
Right.
Also want to make a decision tonight on the 10th Street lighting project? Have any thoughts, or you want to ponder it for a week and get some input from anyone, or what would you like to do?
I make a motion, we table it for a week, see if we get any citizen discussion.
We do what, Payne?
See if we get any discussion from the citizens on it.
Okay, we'll put this on the next agenda item for the next meeting. Dennis, we appreciate DGR and your work with this project.
No problem. We enjoy working with the city, and we look forward to a continued relationship.
So do we.
So,
Thank
okay.
you very much for being
Thank you,
with us.
guys.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.
We'll get now back into review of utility rates and fees and that thought, and fiscal year 2016-17 utility budgets, and then a kind of a general overview of the general fund budget for 2017.
Again, we'll start with the fees, and if you are okay with that. Again, from a staff perspective, the only fee suggestions that we have, and again, I'm not asking you to take any action or anything, but just put these out for discussion yet. But the only increases that we thought should be considered would maybe be in the pool. And in the red along the right-hand side, you'll see some suggestions that we have as staff. And again, those increases are really more philosophical than they are financial. We can increase, our total revenue for the pool is 10 or 11,000 a year. So if we increase at the level that we're talking here, we're probably only going to increase our revenue $700 or $800. So it's not like it's a huge revenue source, but in comparison, I did share that I think Akron's was about 95. I think Iron's, they went up to about somewhere in the 120 range for a family membership. So we did some checking, but so we are still under the other communities in the area. So even with the increase, so but just something for your consideration, I guess. And also the only other suggestion that staff has is, and when you get into the peddlers and solicitors fees, there's a laundry list for a peddler and only one fee for solicitors, and we suggest going to a $50 monthly fee for a 30-day or less permit for peddlers and solicitors, and then a $150 annual permit for both, and just keep them both consistent. So
Again, that some of these entities are exempt, such as like
yeah,
some band or what are those types of things.
yeah,
so.
the scouts, the nonprofits in the community, all the school, all those folks are exempt. It's really designed for the outside entities that are coming into the community. They're going door to door selling things, so that primarily so that we can monitor who's in town and what they're doing, and we usually take copies of their license and we run them through the police department to make sure that they aren't someone that we would rather not have running around town. So that's the main main reason to get the permits to begin with, is to hopefully have some type of tracking as to who's in town going door to door. So when the public calls down here as well, that we've done our research and they're legitimate or they're not legitimate or something like that. So those are the suggestions that I would ask that you consider, and if you have other ideas or thoughts on any of those, please share them with us. And the pool fees, we could go up more, we could not go up at all. I mean, I just threw some numbers out there. Just it's maybe reasonable to increase them. We haven't done so in a number of years, and it might be good to tweak them up a little bit. The pool's never going to be a moneymaker, so. And again, next, unless you have some other comments or questions on the fees, I'd like to just talk briefly about the utility income and expenses. Again, I did create some graphs from 2000 to 2015 that show the revenue and expense and undepreciated and depreciated net income or loss, whichever. And if you go through each of those, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on them tonight either. I just want you to review those. But again, what we're seeing is that we're probably 20 to 30% low on both water and wastewater. My suggestion would be 10% increases on both of those utilities this year, and then look at them again next year and see how they perform, and may have to consider an increase again next year. But we've been running that way for several years, a number of years actually, and we did bump it a little bit, but I think we need to do so again. Electric and gas, they're very sound, functioning, and I don't think there's any need to do anything with those rates at this time. I think we're doing very well in those utilities. And telephone, cable, and internet, we all agreed when we did the transition here to get into the internet business that we don't touch fees in 2016. So we aren't suggesting anything at this point in time. So in those areas. But the only ones I would ask that you maybe consider would be water and wastewater as we proceed down this process. I did not put any increases in the budget, just because I didn't want to assume anything. But at the same time, if we change those, it'll just impact the revenue side. And the expense side is the only thing the state really worries about when it comes to budgetary issues, so. Just really briefly touch base on the budget review schedule. I'd like to go through in more detail again on the 10th, the general fund stuff, and maybe we can finalize the numbers at the next meeting so that we can set a date for a public hearing on March 9th. We'll publish the budget and public hearing information on the 25th of February, and then we'll have to have it certified to the auditor by the 15th. So it kind of gives you a timeline of what we need to be doing here. I did put this letter in here that it's just a letter that went out to all the entities in the city, asking them to not have any increases in their budget this year, with the exception of salary increases, and what we plan to include was 2.25%. As you know, a portion of our employees are under the collective bargaining unit, and they'll be bargaining yet with you for those salaries. So we're just using that as a number for budgetary purposes. So. And again, I have a sheet in here that compares about 12 communities on some of the expenditures out of the general fund. I think I had library, police, fire, and park and rec, and cemetery, and compared about 12 communities, percentages that come out of their general fund revenues for those types of entities. So you can review that at your leisure as well. It just gives you a better idea of where we're at. There's also a list of our general obligation bonds and notes that we currently have, and a timeline of repayment of those. So it gives you an idea of when we can plan maybe another street project in the future, or another project that we may need to borrow for out of the general fund. I did also put together this transfer from utilities to the general fund, and I think the council and we all need to be commended. You know, back when I came, we were at nearly $500,000 a year in transfers from utilities to the general fund. This year we're down in that 240, 250 range, which is a pretty remarkable decrease in the scheme of things. It allows us to take to use our utilities to fund utility projects versus other things that we were funding previously. So we can do underground electric, we can do gas improvements, we can do those kinds of things. So now we'll get into the budget itself. Again, we all have sheets on each page that had any significant changes. I'd kind of like Tom to talk about, if we could, run through each one of the utilities and just talk about the projects that we have on scheduled, and what those costs that we're budgeting, so you guys have a good understanding of what we're planning to do in the next year as far as budgetary. Tom, would you like to touch base on those?
Sure. I'll just go through the capital outlay projects with the water. Start with the water, wastewater, electric, and gas. In the water, we have 3 VFDs at $15,000, and that'll just tie into our SCADA system and help us control our wells better and lower cost of operating the wells. The 2 well rehabs, we've been doing 2 to 3 well rehabs each year. I think this year it'll be 2 because it'll be a major overhaul on one of them, but that seems to work out pretty good in keeping our wells in good shape. So we try to do that every year. The valve and hydrant replacements, that's we've been doing quite a bit of updating dead-end lines and that, so we've been moving a lot more valves, and we've had a lot more of the older valves that we've been replacing. As we find them, we replace the hydrants and the valves as needed. Upgrade dead-end lines, that's something we'll continue to do until we can't find anymore. We just don't want dead ends in our system, so we have circulation with our chemicals.
You tell them maybe what VFDs are?
Variable frequency drives just helps us to control. We might have two wells on 100%, and the VFD will allow us to take that third or fourth well and bring it in at 10, 20% if we need to, and we can just control our flow on it according to our needs on the system, so that we can keep our towers full. And as the towers get full, it'll back off one. It might bring that second and third well that are on 100% down, one of them down to 70 or whatever it needs. And it's really a way to fine-tune the system. And we haven't been able to do that in the past, but the SCADA system we added last year will allow us to do that. And it also allows us to keep better control on the chemicals, so, and the alarms if we have a problem with anything. So that'll really be a nice upgrade for the system and for the future for controlling cost. On the wastewater, there's quite a few items in there that are just upgrades at the wastewater plant. The diffuser rebuilds, we've been doing those. That's our aeration system for the plant. UV jackets and ballasts, that's something we have to replace so many a year, and that's our final disinfection for the outlet to the river. Clarifier parts, chlorine pumps, all that's just down at the plant. We've been relining manholes. We've done 140 sewer manholes, and I believe it's 40 storm sewer intakes in the last probably 7 or 8 years. And the list is getting down a little bit, but we still have quite a few that need some attention. And we've continued to clean 1/3 of the system each year, our sewers, and that's been working better. And then as we find spots, we found another one this last year that some of them, like the downtown alleys, we hit every year. We try to clean our lift stations every year, and that has really helped with our insurance claims, so we aren't getting as many sewer backups, so that's been a big plus for us. On the electric system, the electric guys are busy with the project, so we have not been doing too much outside of the project if we can help it. The gas system, we've had like an 8-year list of projects, updates we want to do on the gas system, and we have in there to have an engineer look over and make sure in the future that we're going in the right direction with it. The amount of money we put in there, we're not sure what that's going to cost, but we think it'll be less than that. And the project we'd like to do next is on West 10th Street. We have our 1938, our system was started in 1938, and it's the original line coming into town, and we'd like to replace that line. And there's dual lines out there. There's a high pressure and a low pressure. It's a 50-pound and a 14-pound line. We'd like to abandon that old 14-pound line. And it just eliminates part of the older system. We've had a few problems out there, and we know it needs some attention. So we can hook everything up to the 50-pound line and control it with the regulators at the house or at the businesses out there in that area, more or less. But that would be a spring of 2017. We would do that once we had the engineer look at it and tell us it's the right direction to go. If it's not, we'd have to rebore a whole new 4-inch main in there to feed the line. So it also eliminates a railroad crossing on West 10th Street. And if we had to put a new line in, that would be probably a $50,000+ project by itself. So that's what we're thinking. A couple other things we want him to look at is like feeding the South Industrial area with a 50-pound line. We have a single feed out there, and if something ever happens on the north end of town, maybe running 50-pound line out that way. So we know we have some options. We just would like somebody to tell us it's the right direction to go. I think that's about it. On the solid waste, we know there's going to be an increase on the gate fees this year, so we did build that into the budget too. I think that's about it.
Okay. We again, we did go over, I do have a list that I provided everyone with page by page that showed any significant changes from the previous year. And just, I'm not going to go line by line in this budget. I just want to see if anyone has any other concerns or questions that that you might have. Again, Ricardo's salary, I just want to maybe briefly touch on that. We did move that to General Utility Administration. It's in the past, we'd had him in cemetery, and he really only works there about 5 months out of the year. The other 12, or the, excuse me, the other 7 months he's doing other duties, and it just is really 42% probably isn't even quite enough, but it does it just reallocates his salary basically from one account to another. It doesn't change what he gets paid or anything like that. So. And there are some other areas that we should be doing that in as well, but maybe the next administrator will have a chance to do that. So someday, there are some things that need to be done, but it doesn't change the bottom line. Any other areas of question that you guys have on the general funds, or excuse me, on the utility stuff at this point?
Yeah, this increase in the gas utility for the salaries. And then, is that all you have there, that
Should be a
percent of
decrease.
Mike's
Yeah,
going
Mike's-
into gas?
Mike's going into gas, yes, and it came out of either cable. I think his came out of cable. So it's the
That's
same
more
thing.
than the general fund increase on salaries, so
Pardon me.
that's actually higher than the general fund transfer on Ricardo's. So that's what I was looking at there.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a 23,000 difference there.
Yeah, it's just shifting his salary
Half of
from
his salary
cable,
from the one
half
to
of
the
cable, half from cable to gas, because that's where he spends half his time. And we did that, if you remember, Jeff Sherman used to be in the gas department, and when he left, we did not replace him. So. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll just briefly run through the general fund stuff as well, without getting into a lot of depth tonight, and then we'll get into more detail at the next meeting, if that's okay with everyone. And again, there weren't a lot of changes in the general fund budget as far as, we had, and I highlighted those in a separate sheet by page for you, but we did see some increase in property taxes this year and road use tax revenue because of the gas tax increase, which did really helped our general fund pretty substantially. The ambulance, again, we have a full-time director now, so there was a substantial increase due to that. Increase in mayor and council salaries that was approved a couple of years ago, and they couldn't go into effect until after the election. And then that was really the bulk of any changes that amounted to anything. And again, I don't want to go through it line by line, but if you get the opportunity to, unless you have some questions tonight, if you get the opportunity to kind of go through it, and then we'll hit on it we'll hit on the general fund portion of it in more detail or more in-depth discussions at the next meeting, if that's okay. And otherwise, again, I'm extremely pleased with. Maybe we should touch base before I forget here on the capital equipment expenditures planned for this next year. We're in need of a copier. The copier is at a point where they can't get parts for it, and we're hoping we can make it to the budget year, but if not, so be it. But We're going to have to replace copier. Again, the server is something that we are probably going to have to look at replacing in the next year. Police cars is scheduled to be replaced. The John Deere tractor mower is the tractor that Buck Hamilton drives, and that thing it'll be 10 years old, and the hours are such, and it needs to be traded, and we do have money in the capital equipment fund to pay for it, and it's a once every 10-year expenditure, so that'll be purchased this year, as well as 2 riding mowers. We have expedited the depreciation on our riding mowers. We did some studies with the cost of operation, and we purchased those mowers at a 15 or 20% discount. We get government rates. And so when you factor in the government discount to purchase and the increased revenue that we get, or the increased value they have on it at a trade, and the third year where we're keeping those mowers, the cost of operation was quite high and the downtime was quite high. So you put all that together, we can trade more frequently, and the actual cost of the city is pretty much the same. It's almost a wash, actually. It just looks worse because you see it in one line item versus in repairs and equipment and those kinds of things. So you'll see 2 mowers on here this year, and then the electric department pickup is on the schedule to be replaced this year. So $150,000 total of capital expenditures. Otherwise, I think that's about the only thing. I'm just thrilled so far that the budget looks like it does with the transfers reduced again pretty significantly, and a lot of that's because we have increased revenues in gas tax and property taxes. And that being said, the increase in property taxes, we did not increase the levy rate. It's based on the same levy rate as last year, so we did not do anything with the levy rate. So we're not increasing taxes, tax rates. So we're about the 15th year in a row, I think. So. Anyway, unless you have other questions, I don't want to waste a lot of your time tonight, but we'll get into a more in-depth discussion of the general fund piece at the next meeting, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. And if you have questions between now and then, just shoot me an email or give me a call or something, and we can talk about it. I think that's all I have, unless you guys have questions.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Travis. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Payne. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thanks again for being with us. Thanks for your work, staff.
Wait, you got to pass this around.